In every age and every kingdom, there are men and women who live to be liked, and there are those who rule because they are respected. The first become forgotten. The second, they write history. Today we confront a brutal reality. The more you crave to be liked, the weaker you appear. People ignore your voice, cross your boundaries, and treat you as a servant, not a leader. But respect bends the world in your favor. And tonight, you will learn the Machiavellian art of turning away from approval and embracing the dark power of being respected. Niccolò Machiavelli once warned, "It is better to be feared than loved." If you cannot be both, why? Because love depends on others. It is fragile. It is fleeting. The man who seeks love becomes chained by the opinions of the masses, desperate for applause, terrified of rejection. Like a leaf in the wind, he is blown wherever the crowd goes, until he disappears into irrelevance. Listen carefully, for there is a poison that creeps slowly into the soul of every man and woman who seeks approval. It is subtle, it is seductive, and yet it is fatal. This poison is the desire to be liked, to be admired by all, to have your face reflected in the eyes of those around you as if your worth depended upon their approval. Many call it charm, warmth, or friendliness. I call it a weakness, a chain that binds the ambitious, and a mask that hides the truth of power. To seek to be liked is to surrender your independence. It is to hand your judgment, your actions, and your destiny to the whims of others. Consider the man who lives to please. Every smile he offers, every nod he grants, every compromise he makes is an invisible chain tightening around his neck. He adjusts his words to the taste of those he wishes to impress. He softens his voice, bends his principles, and sacrifices his strength. What he believes is diplomacy, what he calls kindness, is nothing more than submission disguised as social grace. History is filled with men and women who fell because they wished to be liked. Kings and generals, entrepreneurs and leaders, they surrounded themselves with yes men, courtiers who applauded their every idea, friends who never challenged them, lovers who flattered them. And yet when the storm came, these very people turned away, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. Why? Because love is fragile and admiration is fleeting. Those who live to be liked build their houses upon sand. When the winds of challenge blow, the sand collapses, and they are swallowed by the tide of neglect or betrayal. Imagine a ruler in his court, adored by all for his charm. The ministers laugh at his jokes, the people cheer his speeches, the nobles bow and whisper praise. He believes he is secure, that his popularity is a shield against envy and ambition, yet he is blind. The man who seeks to be liked cannot see the knife being sharpened in the dark. He cannot hear the whispers of betrayal that grow louder with every flattering word. The court, the people, the very allies he believes he has, are not bound by loyalty, but by the illusion that he is agreeable. When the moment of decision arrives, when the test of strength or cunning appears, he will find himself alone. Those who sought to please have no allies. They have only spectators. Now consider the psychology of the crowd. The masses are fickle. They celebrate those who are pleasant, who entertain, who appease. They follow the agreeable, the polite, the charming. But their adoration is shallow, dependent upon mood, fashion, and circumstance. Today they applaud, tomorrow they scorn. One word, one misstep, and the very people who smiled upon you will turn their faces, revealing a truth that you refuse to acknowledge. The crowd respects only power, decisiveness, and fear more than love. To desire to be liked is to live in a constant state of vigilance, adjusting your words, controlling your gestures, masking your thoughts. You cannot speak freely. Every syllable must be weighed. You cannot act decisively. Every move must be softened to avoid offense. You cannot form alliances that require honesty or toughness, because toughness offends, and honesty cuts the heart of the fragile ego. The man who seeks approval is enslaved by manners, etiquette, and the fleeting moods of those he calls peers. He is like a puppet whose strings are pulled by the desires and opinions of others, and when the puppeteer's hand retreats, he collapses. Observe the world around you. How many people live not for themselves, but for the applause of strangers? How many leaders have lost their way because they feared the displeasure of their subordinates more than the wrath of history? In personal relationships, those who seek to be liked are manipulated easily, used as instruments for others' gain. They give too much, forgive too easily, tolerate injustice because confrontation is unpleasant, and sacrifice opportunity because fear of disapproval outweighs reason. And yet this desire to be liked is praised by society as virtue. We are told to be kind, to be friendly, to compromise, to be agreeable. There is no doubt that kindness has its place. But understand this. When kindness is offered at the cost of authority, at the cost of power, at the cost of strategic advantage, it becomes weakness disguised as virtue. The approval of others cannot protect you from adversity. The applause of the crowd cannot enforce obedience or secure loyalty. The smiles of acquaintances cannot create fear, nor can their flattery substitute for strategy. The man who lives to be liked is always in debt to others. He owes his decisions to approval, his emotions to praise, his actions to consent. He cannot command. He cannot dictate. He cannot enforce his will. He is trapped in a perpetual performance, entertaining those whose love is temporary, serving those whose loyalty is conditional, sacrificing his own potential to maintain a facade of amiability. In contrast, the man who understands the peril of seeking approval distances himself from the crowd. He does not live to please. He acts for himself, for his ambition, for the strategy he deems necessary. He does not measure the merit of his deeds by applause, but by effect. The crowd may rage or cheer. He is unmoved. He is not enslaved by their opinion, and therefore he can act decisively, swiftly, and strategically. He does not fear criticism. He anticipates resistance. He does not chase admiration. He commands respect through action. Consider the lesson carefully. The pursuit of being liked is a trap. It is a seduction that conceals chains beneath the velvet of approval. It teaches dependence where independence is needed. It fosters fragility where strength is required. Every compromise, every smile, every nod in pursuit of being liked is an investment in weakness, a deposit that will one day be called upon in the form of betrayal, neglect, or irrelevance. The crowd will not shield you. The admirers will not defend you. The flattery will not sustain you when the storm comes. To escape this trap requires a conscious awakening. It requires understanding that approval is not power. It requires recognizing that being liked is the currency of fools, and respect, fear, and authority are the currency of the wise. The desire to be liked blinds the mind, weakens the hand, and constrains the spirit. It is a subtle erosion of ambition, a quiet death of strength, a surrender to the trivial whims of the crowd. So reflect upon your own life, upon the choices you make, and upon the subtle ways in which you seek approval. How often do you compromise your judgment to avoid disapproval? How often do you soften your words to be agreeable? How often do you ignore opportunity because it risks criticism? Every such act is a step deeper into the trap, a tightening of invisible chains that will one day prevent you from achieving what you desire most. Respect, on the other hand, is built on strength, on mystery, on the ability to command and control. A ruler, a leader, even a simple man in his own household must understand. Love invites familiarity. Respect demands distance. When people respect you, they think twice before crossing you. They do not trample on your name because they fear the consequences. Now that we understand the peril of being liked, we must turn our attention to a truth far more enduring, far more potent. Respect. While love is fragile, fleeting, and dependent upon whim, respect is enduring, commanding, and grounded in strength. It is the quiet force that bends the world to the will of the wise. Machiavelli, observing the courts and battlefields of Renaissance Italy, understood this better than any man. He knew that a ruler could survive the scorn of his enemies, endure betrayal by friends, and navigate the chaos of power, so long as he commanded respect. Love, on the other hand, offered no such protection. To be respected is to be acknowledged as a force, a presence, a being whose decisions carry weight and whose name carries consequence. Respect is the currency of power. It is not granted lightly, nor is it dependent on charm, on flattery, or on the applause of the crowd. It is earned often through calculated action, decisiveness, and the ability to inspire both admiration and a subtle fear. The man who commands respect does not seek to please. He seeks to be recognized, not adored. Consider the rulers of history who have survived against insurmountable odds, the generals who triumphed where others fell, the statesmen whose words became law. Were they loved? Perhaps by some, yes. But it was not love that sustained their power. It was respect. The admiration of the masses can shift with rumor, fashion, or sentiment. Respect, however, is anchored in recognition of strength, competence, and authority. It is a shield that repels betrayal, a sword that enforces will, a foundation upon which empires are built. Observe carefully the psychology behind this principle. The man or woman who seeks love makes themselves familiar, approachable, even predictable. There is no mystery, no tension, no force behind their presence. People follow them for pleasure, not out of duty or caution. But the man who demands respect is different. He is measured, deliberate, and unyielding. His words are few but weighted. His actions are deliberate, and his silence carries meaning. To be respected is to make others consider the consequences of their choices, to make them pause before opposition, to make them understand that their decisions have weight in your presence. Love, in contrast, is fragile because it is conditional. People love you as long as you meet their expectations, soothe their egos, or entertain their sensibilities. They may turn on you if you disappoint, challenge, or assert your authority. Respect, however, transcends personal preference. It does not require smiles. It does not rely on charm. It is not given because you are pleasant. It is demanded because of what you represent, because of what you have proven, because of the power you wield, whether quietly or overtly. Consider a prince who must govern a turbulent state. He may be charming, affable, adored by the people, and yet when a crisis arrives, an invasion, a rebellion, or betrayal, those who loved him cannot protect him. They admire, they cheer, they lament, but they do not act. Only those who respect him, who recognize his authority and power, will take action. The soldiers will fight, the ministers will obey, the allies will follow. The ruler who relies on love alone is vulnerable. The ruler who commands respect is invincible. Respect also creates a psychological leverage over others. When you are respected, people consider your judgment before making decisions. They fear the consequences of defiance. They hesitate before crossing you. This hesitation is a weapon. The recognition of your authority, your discipline, your decisiveness, and your unpredictability generates power beyond the mere act of action. You do not need to coerce constantly. The knowledge that you could act decisively and without hesitation enforces obedience preemptively. Now notice the subtle difference in demeanor between those who seek love and those who demand respect. The former is eager to please, quick to smile, and anxious to avoid conflict. Their energy is expended in entertaining, appeasing, and flattering. Their attention is fragmented, scattered, always seeking affirmation. The latter is deliberate, controlled, and measured. They speak when necessary, act when required, and remain quiet when silence preserves power. Their presence alone commands the attention of the room, not because of charm, but because of authority. Respect also operates in the realm of fear. Machiavelli argued that fear, when balanced properly, is a tool more reliable than love. To be feared in the sense of being respected is not to be despised, not to incite hatred, but to establish boundaries. People respect the leader who does not bend to every whim, who does not tolerate disrespect, who enforces rules decisively. The wise leader cultivates this balance carefully, so that fear is controlled, precise, and strategic. This is why respect lasts longer than love. It is rooted in consequence, not emotion. Another aspect of respect is that it preserves independence. When people love you, they influence your actions through their expectations, their desires, and their conditional affection. When they respect you, they acknowledge your autonomy. Respect allows you to act according to your strategy, to make decisions without pandering to sentiment, and to enforce rules without hesitation. It positions you above the petty manipulations of those who live to please or seek approval. It is also essential to understand that respect can be cultivated deliberately. It does not depend on charisma alone. It depends on consistency, decisiveness, and perception. You do not need to be loved to be respected. You need only to be perceived as someone who acts with authority, who enforces consequences, who commands attention, and who walks with confidence. People respect those who act in alignment with their power, not those who curry favor through charm. Consider the courtier who flatters endlessly, smiling at every remark, appeasing every whim. He is liked, perhaps even adored, yet when decisions must be made, he is powerless. Compare him to the advisor who speaks rarely, whose words are calculated, whose knowledge is feared and respected. One is liked. One is obeyed. One will be forgotten when the winds of fortune shift. The other leaves an imprint that endures. The principle of respect over love also applies in everyday life, far beyond kings and generals. In business, the employee who is eager to please will be manipulated, overlooked, or exploited. The entrepreneur who seeks admiration will compromise his strategy to appease partners or clients. The individual who prioritizes respect will establish authority, enforce boundaries, and inspire loyalty, Because others recognize strength and decisiveness. Respect is a magnet that draws cooperation and obedience. Love is a fleeting mirage that can vanish without warning. Finally, understand this. Those who seek to be liked are vulnerable to exploitation because their motivations are transparent. Their desire for approval can be read like an open book. Those who demand respect, however, remain enigmatic. They are not predictable. They are not malleable. Their strength is not in pleasing others, but in controlling themselves, in acting decisively, in being perceived as someone whose presence alters the behavior of those around them. To embrace this principle is to shift your entire perspective. It is to see approval as a distraction, as a trap, as the seductive poison that erodes your independence. It is to recognize that love is conditional, unreliable, and fleeting, while respect is anchored in recognition, consequence, and authority. To seek respect is to place yourself in command of your destiny, to operate from a position of power, and to create a force that endures long after the admiration of others has faded. Men follow strength. They obey the decisive. They are drawn to mystery. Like wolves in the night, they respect only the leader who walks with calm authority. Kindness alone will not save you. It invites contempt. Mercy without strength breeds rebellion. But when you combine intelligence with the quiet threat of power, respect is inevitable. Now, having understood the peril of being liked and the enduring force of respect, we turn to a truth that few truly comprehend: the psychology of power. Power is not merely the possession of authority, wealth, or weapons. Power resides in the mind, in perception, and in the subtle currents of influence that flow unseen through every interaction. To command power, one must first understand how others perceive, react, and ultimately obey. Power is a game of perception. The man who wields influence understands that reality is often irrelevant compared to the impression one creates. The crowd does not respect nuance. It respects strength. It does not follow subtlety. It follows decisiveness. It does not honor benevolence. It honors consequence. To understand power is to recognize that people respond not to truth alone, but to the symbols of authority, the gestures of command, and the aura of certainty. Consider a general in the battlefield. Victory is not achieved solely through tactics or strategy. It is also achieved through the perception of dominance. Soldiers fight harder for a commander they believe to be fearless, decisive, and unyielding. Enemies hesitate before attacking a leader who projects control and authority. The perception of power becomes a weapon as deadly as the sword itself. The wise leader cultivates this perception deliberately, understanding that human behavior is guided more by perceived strength than by rational calculation. Power also relies on controlled unpredictability. The predictable man is powerless. The one whose actions are easily anticipated is vulnerable to manipulation. The strong, the respected, and the feared, however, cultivate an element of unpredictability, enough to keep others cautious, attentive, and uncertain. The uncertainty inspires obedience without overt coercion. People will obey a leader not merely because they fear punishment, but because they do not dare miscalculate the consequences of defiance. Another element of power lies in understanding human desire and motivation. People are guided by self-interest, envy, ambition, and fear. The man who understands these forces can manipulate them, channel them, and even neutralize them. The fool, seeking to be liked, fails to grasp this. He assumes people act according to fairness, gratitude, or morality. He is blind to the currents beneath their smiles, the hidden ambitions behind their praise. The master of power sees all, who envies, who obeys, who schemes, and who hesitates. He positions himself to exploit weakness and strengthen his influence. Power is amplified by the strategic use of fear. Fear, carefully applied, is a tool of obedience. It need not be cruelty, nor must it inspire hatred. It must simply signal consequence and command attention. A ruler who enforces rules with clarity, who punishes decisively when boundaries are crossed, and who maintains an aura of authority, generates power that extends far beyond immediate action. The threat of consequence is often more effective than the act itself because it shapes behavior preemptively. Observe how power manifests in subtle interactions. In conversation, the powerful listen more than they speak, their words weighted and deliberate. In meetings, they remain calm, unshaken by criticism, confident in their judgment. In relationships, they withhold approval, reward selectively, and allow respect to accumulate slowly. Every gesture, every word, every choice is calculated to reinforce perception and consolidate authority. The weak seek approval, the strong command it. It is also essential to understand that power is relational. One is never powerful in isolation. Power exists in the interplay between individuals, in the capacity to influence others' decisions, emotions, and actions. A man who commands respect, inspires obedience, or instills fear has power because he shapes the behavior of others. Without subjects to influence, power is empty. Without perception, influence is null. To wield power effectively is to understand the dynamics of human behavior, the currents of desire, and the levers of control. The psychology of power further teaches that restraint is often more effective than excess. The man who acts impulsively, who reveals all his intentions, who overextends his authority, diminishes his own influence. Power is sustained by mystery, by patience, and by strategic timing. The knowledge that a leader is deliberate, that he weighs decisions carefully, and that his actions are rare but consequential, generates obedience and respect that continuous action could never achieve. Consider historical figures who mastered the psychology of power. They understood that visibility does not equate to influence, that popularity does not secure obedience, and that overt displays of emotion weaken authority. They cultivated presence, silence, and decisiveness. They understood that the eyes of others are not merely observers. They are instruments through which power is enacted. By controlling perception, by anticipating behavior, and by projecting authority, they shaped reality itself. Power is inseparable from self-control. The man who cannot control his emotions, who seeks validation, or who acts from impulse surrenders his influence to those around him. The strong individual internalizes discipline, masks vulnerability, and channels desire towards strategy. Every reaction is deliberate, every choice considered. People obey strength, not sentiment. They follow consequence, not appeal. Those who master themselves master the world around them. Another facet of power lies in the art of alliances and networks. Power is not simply a matter of individual strength. It is the capacity to command cooperation, to align interests, and to influence the ambitions of others. The master of power manipulates alliances subtly, rewarding loyalty and sanctioning betrayal with precision. He understands that respect and fear extend through these networks, reinforcing his position. Those who seek to be liked, however, are constantly exploited within networks, their desire for approval making them pliable and weak. Finally, consider the internalization of power. True authority begins within. The man who respects himself, who enforces his own rules, and who prioritizes strategic over emotional outcomes, projects a presence that others instinctively follow. Psychology dictates that people mirror strength. They align with authority, anticipate consequence, and respect decisiveness. Power, therefore, is as much about perception as it is about reality, as much about influence as it is about capability. Those who master this inner psychology inevitably shape the outer world. Thus, the psychology of power reveals the machinery of human behavior. It exposes the futility of seeking approval, the fragility of love, and the durability of respect. It demonstrates that influence is earned through calculated action, disciplined perception, and the subtle manipulation of fear and admiration. Those who comprehend this truth are no longer slaves to the whims of others. They are architects of their destiny, commanders of the currents of influence, and masters of the unseen forces that govern obedience and respect. Yet hear me well, fear must be controlled. The prince who becomes hated digs his own grave. There is an art to this balance. Give rewards sparingly, punish when necessary, speak less than you know, and never reveal all your thoughts. Keep them guessing. Let them respect your silence more than another man's endless words. Having explored the psychology of power, we now confront one of the most delicate and potent tools in the arsenal of influence, fear. Fear, when wielded with precision and intelligence, becomes an instrument of control, a silent whisper that bends behavior, commands attention, and enforces respect. Yet fear is a double-edged weapon. Misused, it breeds hatred, rebellion, and eventual downfall. Mastered, it ensures obedience, loyalty, and a reputation that stretches far beyond immediate reach. Niccolò Machiavelli, observing the courts and battlefields of Renaissance Italy, understood that love is fragile, admiration is fleeting, but fear, controlled fear, creates power that endures. He warned rulers to balance fear with respect, to wield it without cruelty, yet without hesitation. The goal is not to incite hatred, for hatred is corrosive. It is to instill a recognition of consequence, an awareness that defiance carries peril. This awareness commands attention even in your absence and extends your influence without the constant need for enforcement. Consider the mechanics of fear. It is not the fear of arbitrary cruelty that ensures obedience. The fool can strike and terrify, yet the terror he inspires is chaotic, fleeting, and often turns allies into enemies. True controlled fear arises from predictability in judgment, decisiveness in action, and an aura of authority. People must understand that when a boundary is crossed, when rules are ignored, or when deception occurs, there will be a consequence. Not because of malice, but because strength demands it. Notice the subtlety in this practice. Controlled fear is not about yelling, intimidation, or spectacle. It is about presence, calculation, and restraint. A ruler, a leader, a strategist must convey that he is not to be trifled with without descending into tyranny. A glance, a measured word, or a decisive action can create a ripple of apprehension that reshapes behavior across a room, a boardroom, or even a kingdom. The mere perception that one can act with authority without hesitation is more effective than repeated acts of punishment. There is also a psychological principle at work. Human beings respond instinctively to potential harm. The anticipation of consequence is more powerful than consequence itself. Those who understand this wield fear like a silent force, shaping actions before any punitive measure is necessary. The threat of a well-timed reprimand, the possibility of lost favor, the subtle reminder of capability all operate in this realm. Controlled fear relies upon the mind of the observer as much as on the actions of the one who commands it. Consider historical examples. A general who disciplined his troops with precision, rewarding loyalty and punishing insubordination, instilled obedience without the need for constant enforcement. A monarch who enforced laws consistently yet fairly cultivated a reputation that commanded compliance. In both cases, fear was not cruelty. It was structure, consequence, and recognition of authority. Those who opposed them hesitated, allies acted decisively, and rebellion was stifled before it could arise. Controlled fear also requires the mastery of timing. A leader must discern when to act, when to withdraw, and when to allow uncertainty to build. Impulsive action undermines authority. Delayed action erodes credibility. The master of controlled fear observes, measures, and deploys influence with surgical precision. Every act reinforces perception that he is decisive, unyielding, and capable of enforcing boundaries without hesitation. Those who do not understand this resort to erratic punishment, creating chaos and resentment, leaving their authority in ruins. Another aspect of controlled fear is the use of restraint. Power is magnified by knowing when not to act. The leader who strikes indiscriminately, who punishes without discretion, creates hatred and rebellion. The master, however, balances fear with justice, rewarding loyalty and sanctioning betrayal sparingly but decisively. The knowledge that consequences are inevitable but measured fosters obedience without hatred, respect without resentment. Fear becomes a tool, not a weapon of destruction. Observe the subtle cues that project fear without cruelty. The firm tone, the unwavering gaze, the measured presence, and the reputation for decisive action all communicate capability without overt violence. People adjust their behavior, predict your potential responses, and comply, not because they are coerced in the moment, but because they anticipate consequences in advance. This is the essence of controlled fear, influencing action through anticipation, not through repeated force. Controlled fear also operates in networks of influence. The perception of authority extends beyond direct interaction. Subordinates observe reactions, allies anticipate judgments, and competitors weigh potential risks. Fear spreads through reputation, reinforced by consistent action and deliberate presence. The master does not need to enforce compliance constantly. The reputation of decisive judgment creates a web of influence that acts even in his absence. Consider the psychology of admiration intertwined with fear. Those who respect and fear you simultaneously are most powerful. Admiration alone can be shallow, fleeting, and dependent on mood. Fear alone can generate rebellion, resentment, or hatred. The balance is delicate. Inspire awe, demonstrate capability, enforce boundaries, and cultivate an air of inevitability. The combination ensures that others act in accordance with your strategy, not from desire, but from recognition of consequence. It is also crucial to understand the internal mastery required. Fear is most effective when it originates from a position of calm control. The man who is anxious, impulsive, or reactive projects weakness even while attempting to instill fear. The master of controlled fear is composed, deliberate, and strategic. He does not seek to intimidate through volume or spectacle. He commands attention through discipline, authority, and an aura of inevitability. Others sense this instinctively, and their behavior aligns accordingly. In daily life, controlled fear manifests in countless interactions. A manager who enforces rules decisively without drama earns obedience. A parent who sets clear boundaries communicates authority. A politician who balances firmness with strategic alliances maintains influence. The principle remains the same. Fear, when controlled, is a multiplier of power, extending influence far beyond immediate action. The perception of consequence shapes behavior more than any act of coercion. Thus, the art of controlled fear is both subtle and deliberate. It requires awareness of human psychology, mastery of perception, and disciplined action. It is a tool that ensures obedience, commands respect, and fortifies authority without descending into tyranny. Those who understand this art operate not through volume or violence, but through anticipation, presence, and consequence, shaping the world around them with precision and restraint. Do not chase approval. Do not explain yourself to everyone. Withdraw when needed. Like the sun behind the clouds, your absence will make your presence more valuable. The man who stands apart commands attention. The one always available invites contempt. Having explored the power of controlled fear, we now enter a realm even subtler, yet equally vital: strategic detachment. To master influence, one must learn the art of standing apart, not in isolation, but in calculated distance. Detachment is not indifference. It is deliberate separation from the trivialities, whims, and manipulations of those who surround you. It is the quiet strength that prevents entanglement, preserves autonomy, and heightens perception. Machiavelli observed that rulers and leaders who sought constant closeness with others often fell prey to flattery, intrigue, and betrayal, while those who maintained strategic distance commanded true authority. Strategic detachment begins with the understanding that not every interaction requires involvement. The man who engages with every opinion, pleases every request, or reacts to every slight is consumed by the energy of others. He is perpetually entangled, drained by the demands of those who seek approval or recognition. In contrast, the master of detachment exercises discretion, intervenes only when it serves purpose, and allows events to unfold under his observation. By appearing aloof, he projects power, the sense that he is above triviality, unshaken by chaos, and guided by a greater vision. Consider the subtle psychology at play. Humans are naturally drawn to those who are slightly unattainable, mysterious, or removed. We respect the person whose presence carries weight, whose attention is earned, and whose judgment is reserved. Those who make themselves too available risk diminishing their influence. The eager, ever-present man is treated as ordinary, predictable, and replaceable. The detached, measured, and strategic individual cultivates a presence that commands attention, generates curiosity, and ensures that every interaction is significant. Strategic detachment also protects from manipulation. The desire to be liked, as we have seen, exposes one to subtle coercion, flattery, and deception. By maintaining distance, emotional, social, and sometimes intellectual, the master prevents others from exploiting weakness. He observes motivations, anticipates actions, and calculates responses without the clouding influence of immediate personal attachment. Detachment is armor, shielding the mind from entanglement while allowing the acquisition of valuable insight. Observe the historical masters of detachment. Leaders, generals, and statesmen who achieved greatness often surrounded themselves with aides, advisors, and courtiers, yet kept them at measured distance. They listened, they observed, but they revealed only what served strategy. Their presence was commanding not because they sought constant approval, but because they controlled the flow of information, influence, and access. People vied for proximity, hoping for favor, yet in doing so they revealed their own ambitions. The detached leader watched, learned, and acted at the decisive moment. Detachment is also a tool for strategic influence. By withdrawing from constant interaction, the master creates scarcity. Attention becomes valuable. The timing of involvement conveys importance. Those who are always present dilute their power. Those who engage selectively amplify it. Every appearance, every intervention, every word carries weight because it is measured, deliberate, and purposeful. The perception of scarcity enhances authority, fostering respect and compliance. Consider the interplay between detachment and fear. The man who enforces boundaries and commands obedience gains additional strength when he is selectively present. Fear is amplified because the consequences of action are unpredictable. Allies and adversaries alike hesitate, calculating their moves in anticipation of decisive, deliberate action. Detachment transforms fear into a strategic instrument. It is not merely the threat of punishment, but the uncertainty of presence that governs behavior. Strategic detachment also cultivates clarity of judgment. Immersion in constant interaction, endless flattery, and ceaseless persuasion clouds the mind. The detached individual maintains perspective, observes patterns, and assesses motives without emotional interference. This clarity allows decisions that are both calculated and decisive. He acts when necessary, withdraws when prudent, and always positions himself above the fray. Furthermore, detachment preserves autonomy. The man who is constantly engaged with the desires and opinions of others surrenders his freedom, even subtly. Choices are influenced by expectation, sentiment, and conditional approval. The detached individual acts according to principle, strategy, and foresight. He is guided not by the transient whims of the crowd, but by deliberate calculation. This autonomy becomes visible to others, inspiring respect, caution, and sometimes envy. Strategic detachment is also relational. The master understands how to position himself in networks of influence. He cultivates alliances and loyalty without overexposure. He communicates selectively, allowing others to perceive his power while withholding the full extent of his knowledge or intent. In social, political, and professional arenas, this measured presence ensures that his authority is neither diminished by overexposure nor challenged through overfamiliarity. Notice the subtle interplay of power, respect, and detachment. Those who are constantly visible, always seeking approval, or perpetually involved dilute the force of their authority. Those who act with restraint, intervene with precision, and maintain emotional and strategic distance project control, competence, and inevitability. Presence alone becomes an instrument of influence, fear, and respect. In practical terms, strategic detachment manifests as selective engagement, measured response, and calculated absence. One observes before acting, listens before speaking, and waits for the optimal moment to influence outcomes. This requires patience, discipline, and self-control. It is not indifference, but deliberate mastery of focus, energy, and attention. Those who understand this principle wield influence that extends far beyond immediate interaction. Finally, consider the psychological impact of detachment on those around you. People who are constantly available become predictable, ordinary, and easily underestimated. Those who maintain distance, who reveal themselves only in calculated moments, generate curiosity, admiration, and caution. Others learn to anticipate consequences, weigh their actions carefully, and align behavior according to perceived authority. Strategic detachment transforms presence into power and absence into leverage, ensuring that influence is sustained, respected, and effective. Having explored the dangers of being liked, the enduring power of respect, the psychology of influence, the art of controlled fear, and the mastery of strategic detachment, we arrive at the final, most vital principle, the blueprint of transformation. This is not a mere set of instructions. It is a path for those willing to abandon the illusions of approval, to shed the weight of sentiment, and to rise as a figure whose presence commands authority, whose actions shape outcomes, and whose reputation endures beyond admiration. Transformation begins with the recognition of your current state. Most people live in the subtle enslavement of seeking approval. They adjust their words, suppress desires, and compromise principles in pursuit of smiles, applause, or validation. The first step toward power is awareness, the understanding that this behavior is a trap, a chain that limits potential, and a barrier to influence. The moment you see this clearly, you are no longer passive. You begin the deliberate process of restructuring your identity, perception, and action. The next phase is deliberate action to prioritize respect over love. This requires a recalibration of behavior, language, and presence. Speak less, but let every word carry weight. Act decisively, ensuring that your actions create consequence. Do not seek approval or flattery. Seek recognition of authority. Allow others to admire, fear, or obey, but never compromise your integrity or strategy to be liked. Every interaction becomes a test. Does it reinforce my presence, my authority, my vision, or does it dilute it? Transformation demands honesty with yourself, discipline in execution, and consistency in presence. Control over perception is critical in this blueprint. Human beings judge not only by action but by reputation, appearance, and presence. The transformed individual becomes deliberate in cultivating an aura of authority. This is not deception, but mastery over the subtle signals that convey competence, decisiveness, and power. Posture, tone, selective visibility, and strategic speech all become instruments of influence. Those who encounter you must sense that every decision is measured, every action intentional, and every word significant. Perception shapes reality, and in mastering perception, you command the world around you. Integration of controlled fear is a vital pillar of transformation. Fear, when applied precisely, signals boundaries, consequences, and authority, but it must be balanced with fairness and restraint. Punish decisively when rules are broken, reward loyalty when deserved, and cultivate an air of inevitability. People must anticipate consequence before it occurs, shaping behavior through psychological influence rather than constant coercion. The transformed individual is both respected and subtly feared, creating a combination of power that is difficult to oppose or undermine. Strategic detachment must also be embedded within this transformation. Withdraw selectively, engage deliberately, and maintain the mystery of calculated distance. Availability dilutes authority. Measured absence amplifies influence. By controlling your presence, you control attention, expectations, and anticipation. Allies and rivals alike are guided by perception, and your absence becomes a tool of influence, enhancing respect, curiosity, and caution. Detachment is not abandonment. It is the deliberate mastery of space, time, and social energy. Self-discipline forms the backbone of this blueprint. Transformation is not a temporary adjustment. It is the forging of habits, mindset, and character into a structure that enforces authority. Emotional impulses are controlled, desires are aligned with strategy, and every interaction is evaluated for its long-term impact. The transformed individual acts with precision, thinks in terms of consequence, and measures every move against the objectives of influence, power, and respect. Next is the cultivation of alliances and networks. The blueprint emphasizes strategic relationships over superficial friendships. Surround yourself with those whose loyalty is earned, whose skills complement your vision, and whose presence reinforces your authority. Observe their motivations, anticipate their ambitions, and intervene when necessary to align interests. Influence extends not only through your direct actions, but through the network of people who recognize and respect your authority. Strategic alignment is a multiplier of power, expanding influence far beyond immediate reach. Consistency is another pillar. Transformation is reinforced through repeated, deliberate action. Inconsistency breeds doubt, undermines authority, and invites exploitation. Every decision, reward, and sanction must align with the perception of decisiveness and integrity. People must learn to anticipate your standards, your boundaries, and your methods, not because of familiarity, but because of unwavering principle. Consistency in authority is the signal that establishes control, embeds respect, and reinforces the perception of inevitability. Furthermore, the blueprint requires mastery over knowledge and information. The transformed individual reveals only what is necessary, retains secrets strategically, and cultivates understanding of motives, ambitions, and vulnerabilities of those around them. Knowledge becomes power, but discretion amplifies it. By controlling the flow of information, you dictate perception, influence decisions, and shape the dynamics of authority. Transparency is selective. Revelation is deliberate. This mastery of knowledge ensures that your presence is both commanding and enigmatic. Reflection and adaptation are vital to transformation. The world is dynamic, human behavior unpredictable, and circumstances ever-changing. The blueprint is not rigid. It is a living framework that requires continuous observation, evaluation, and adjustment. A leader who fails to adapt becomes predictable, and predictability erodes influence. The transformed individual observes patterns, anticipates shifts, and adjusts strategy without compromising authority, ensuring that respect, fear, and influence remain intact. Finally, internal mastery is essential. Transformation begins within. Self-respect, discipline, clarity of purpose, and control over emotion form the foundation. Without internal strength, external influence is brittle. The individual who masters himself projects authority naturally, navigates conflict decisively, and enforces boundaries with precision. Those around him instinctively follow, not because of charm or favor, but because of the aura of competence, decisiveness, and inevitability that emanates from mastery over self. Thus, the transformation blueprint is a systematic approach. Awareness of weakness, prioritization of respect, control of perception, integration of fear, strategic detachment, disciplined action, cultivation of networks, consistency, mastery of knowledge, adaptability, and internal mastery. Each element reinforces the others, creating a cohesive structure of influence, authority, and power. Those who follow this blueprint are no longer subject to the whims of approval, the fragility of love, or the manipulation of the inexperienced. They operate from a position of calculated strength, projecting influence, commanding respect, and shaping the world around them with deliberate, measured, and decisive action. And now, having walked through the perilous path from the trap of being liked, through the mastery of respect, the psychology of power, the art of controlled fear, and the discipline of strategic detachment, you arrive at the threshold of transformation. The knowledge you have gained is not idle philosophy. It is a weapon, a map, and a mirror. It reveals the weaknesses that have held you back, the illusions that have disguised fragility as virtue, and the strategies that elevate the few above the many. Understand this: the world rewards decisiveness, not charm. It obeys strength, not kindness. It bends to those who command respect, not those who chase approval. Every action you take, every word you speak, every presence you cultivate carries consequence. The individual who embraces these principles does not ask to be liked. He does not seek applause, flattery, or temporary admiration. He commands, influences, and shapes reality because he understands the enduring laws of power. Transformation is not easy. It demands patience, self-control, observation, and calculated action. It requires shedding the desire to please, abandoning the pursuit of fleeting love, and stepping into a presence that is deliberate, measured, and formidable. The path is not for the faint of heart, nor for those unwilling to confront uncomfortable truths. It is for the individual who understands that influence is earned, authority is projected, and respect is cultivated through skill, strategy, and unwavering discipline. Remember always, approval is ephemeral, love is conditional, fear, when controlled, is a tool of obedience. Detachment is the shield of autonomy. Respect is the fortress that withstands the storms of betrayal and time. And transformation, the deliberate, conscious shift from weakness to power, is the ultimate mastery. The choice now lies before you. Will you continue to seek approval, to chase smiles, to live under the judgment of others? Or will you embrace the dark power of respect, command authority, and become a figure whose influence is undeniable, whose presence is formidable, and whose legacy endures? The principles are clear. The blueprint is laid before you. The rest, as always, rests in your hands.